Hello everyone, and welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii, Hawaii Food and Farmer Series. My name is Stephanie Mock, and I will be your guest host today, filling in for Justine and Matt. So thank you for this opportunity to have a very special episode talking to two very special guest speakers who will be joining us today to talk about funding opportunities for Oahu's watersheds, specifically Kaalaea, Waiahole, and Ma'ili'ili. So I'd like to take this moment and just say thank you. Thank you for coming on, guys. Thank you for sitting with us here in the studio today. We appreciate it. So the Food and Farmer Series is basically a series that's focused on meeting Hawaii's movers and shakers in the local agricultural scene, right? Finding out how you got involved in agriculture or natural resource stewardship, and basically why is Hawaii agriculture exciting, and why do you love doing what you do for strengthening our local agricultural scene and our food systems, and ultimately our stewardship of our natural resources here in Hawaii. So again, welcome, and we encourage all of you listening today to tweet at ThinkTech Hawaii, ThinkTech HI, with questions or comments. If you have questions for our speakers, we'd love to hear from you. So please don't hesitate to tweet into us today. All right, so let's focus on just hearing about how these lovely ladies got involved in local agriculture. Basically, were they farmers? Did they study agriculture? How did they even come about working in agriculture and working with farmers throughout the islands, specifically here on Oahu? So Miranda, let's start with you. We have Miranda Foley of Ecologic Consulting. Hello, Miranda.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank you for joining us again. So again, what's your background? Have you lived in Hawaii your whole life? Were you a farmer? How did you get involved in local agriculture here?
Well, I'm a longtime Kailua resident, and I first found myself in Hawaii. Actually, I landed in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. Oh. Never even started out on the main islands. So the northwestern Hawaiian Islands are about 700 miles between here and Kaalaea Atoll, in the middle of nowhere. Very far from agriculture. There's no ag there. No. So my journey is a long one.
Yes.
But when I did eventually make my way to Oahu, I started working in the more Makai watershed partnerships. Makai watershed partnerships usually focus on the areas where most of the population lives, which is along the coast, versus the more Mauka watershed partnerships. And those partnerships focus on conservation land. So about, let's just say 10 years ago, I started working.
Conservative estimate?
Conservative. We're all about conservation here. About 10 years ago, I started working for these watershed partnerships, and what we did is we drafted a management plan for the Ko'olaupoko area on the windward side of Oahu. And this area included Kaneohe, Kailua, and Waimanalo Bay. And this plan talked about what were some of the challenges that folks were facing when they're trying to maintain the health of their watersheds. And then it also proposed solutions. What could they do to improve it? And I was fascinated by the fact that how we care for the land in our very backyard affects the water that we swim in, that we fish in, that we like to paddle in. And so I've spent the last 10 years working there in watersheds and watershed health, natural resource management. Part of the way we use the watershed is agriculture. So in addition to conservation and natural resource management, agriculture is just a part of that suite.
Part of the bigger picture, right?
It's part of the picture that allows us to live and enjoy these islands, absolutely.
Yeah. And so can you tell us a little bit about Ecologic Consulting?
Sure. Ecologic Consulting is a firm that helps people implement their big ideas.
So taking those watershed management plans and turning them into concrete actions.
Actually implementing them.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, so I found myself, again, let's say 10 years later, and the Oahu Resource Conservation and Development Council said, we want to implement this plan. Some of the issues facing the watershed included water quality, and water quality is impacted by how we use the land. And farmers use the land, and there are things that they can do to help improve water when it comes onto their land and make sure that when it comes off of their land, it's still in good shape.
So you kind of came into the agricultural scene from the environmental side and the community side and said, here's a perfect sector that combines both, but ultimately, affects everyone, even if you're not a farmer yourself.
Exactly. And Ecologic Consulting focuses on that intersection between people, natural resources, and even policy. As I started in planning, I now find myself implementing. So our team does focus on projects that involve implementing plans or helping partnerships grow and actually produce results. It's really about helping clients steer toward their goal. We don't do goal setting, we do implementing. And
helping them accomplish those goals.
Exactly. We bring the resources to the table that help them implement it, whether it's having community meetings, whether it's helping folks leverage their resources, or even helping them understand the mandates and statutes that agencies have to operate within to get that work done.
All right, so while you were talking about your consulting firm, Ecologic Consulting, and bringing together community and how they work with different, not only community members, but different sectors of that community, you mentioned Oahu Resource Conservation and Development Council, which I think is a perfect transition to talk to Frankie Koethe, who's with us from Oahu Resource Conservation Development Council. Hi, Frankie.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Of course, of course. So can you tell us about your background and how you got involved in the agricultural scene and kind of where you see it going, or how you intend to use your passion and your skills to help strengthen our local sector in agriculture?
For sure, yeah. So a little bit different than Miranda. I had a very short journey to Hawaii,
Okay.
that I was born and raised here.
Nice.
But I did have a long journey getting to agriculture. So being born and raised here, I was able to enjoy the environment and paddling in it and being in school here from high school through my bachelor's and into my master's, where I did my studies in natural resources and environmental management at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And I had this great opportunity to work with rural community in Kauai. And that's where I really got involved with kupuna and talking to local community and hearing their thoughts. And something that stuck with me a lot was to listen and to observe what they're saying. And I've taken all of those ideas and kept them with me and use them as tools now. So it was a great opportunity to learn stories and different adventures that they've experienced in their life and bring it back to Oahu. And and one day I was with my mom and we decided to go to Farm Fair down at Kaalaea Ranch. And I stumbled across Oahu RC&D, and that's where I learned about best management practices and where agriculture stands with conservation, and that you could really mesh these two ideas together, which didn't really occur to me prior to that. Right. My background was more in coastal resource, rural community sustainability. And this idea I had an aha moment that agriculture and conservation can work together. And so I did a little bit more digging into Oahu RC&D and what they do, and now I'm part of that organization. And what we do at Oahu RC&D is we use 3 strategies for promoting wise stewardship among the lands through farmers and land managers, which is outreach, conservation planning, and watershed management. And I'm lucky enough to be able to use all 3 of those in the projects that I work with at Oahu RC&D. So it's been a long journey getting to agriculture, but I'm so excited to be working in this field and learning about the different community of farmers and how they work together.
I think it's really interesting to see that, you both came into this agricultural sector from different avenues. We have the community planning, outreach, and then we also have the environmental preservation, conservation aspect, and realizing that really all these sectors kind of blend in agriculture, and they're really interdependent on each other as well. You can't have agriculture, like you mentioned, without the environment, and vice versa. So I think it's great hearing about your different backgrounds and how they've all blended into helping strengthen our local agriculture here on Oahu and also throughout Hawaii. So basically, I wanted to talk a little bit. The title of our show today is Funding Opportunities for Farmers and Landowners on Oahu, specifically Kaalaea, Waiahole, and Ma'ili'ili watersheds. So I thought we could just take a quick moment and just give kind of a quick overview of your projects. Basically, what is the goal? And then later on in the show, we're going to go more into specifics and details and lots of photos and kind of delve really deep into that project. So, Miranda, let's start with you. With Ecologic Consulting, it seems that you're working with Oahu RC&D. Can you talk about, what kind of project coordination are you doing? Which watershed? Where is that located? That kind of information.
Absolutely. So Oahu RC&D in 2015 2015, had the opportunity and the resources to focus on Kaalaea and Waiahole watersheds on the windward side of Oahu in the Ko'olaupo'ko region. And so these resources were intended and are intended to help farmers farm in a way that improves watershed health, water quality and watershed health. So that's the goal, and that goal was actually transferred down from Hawaii State Department of Health. These resources were brought to Oahu RC&D from them, and also these were supported by the Environmental Protection Agency, the US EPA. So this idea of watershed health and water quality improvement has trickled down from fed to state to a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And these resources are recognized at all of these levels as being able to do some real good work in watersheds. And so Kaalaea and Waiahole were identified as two areas where there was opportunity. And this opportunity...
And who identified these watersheds and these opportunities?
Good question. So who identified these watersheds?
Yes.
These watersheds were identified through a grant from Department of Health, but they're in support of that Ko'olaupo'ko Watershed Restoration Action Strategy that was written about 10 years ago, where again it outlines challenges and opportunities. And DOH, Hawaii DOH said, well, if we can do good work here, let's try to fund some of these best management practices. And so they looked through the plan and they identified Kaalaea and Waiahole as being two areas where good work could be done. And they said, okay, well, let's put resources into implementing these best management practices. And so they gave funds through a competitive grant to Oahu RC&D to help fund these best management practices. What Ecologic does is they help roll this out. They bring the resources to the people who need to use them, which are farmers.
Right.
So again, if you want to improve watersheds and water quality, you need to improve the way you use the land. And we can help farmers do that with just a little bit of additional resources. They know how to farm. They know what water quality looks like coming onto and off of their property, and they have great ideas, fantastic ideas about what they could do to improve that the water quality and watershed health. These resources bring that to bear. It just helps them implement what they already know is a good idea and what's in their heart, what they want to do.
Wow, that was a great speech. Oh my goodness, I can't really add on that. I'm like, what's our next question? And so I think it was great that you're talking about Windward Oahu, but I thought we could just touch really briefly. And can you tell us a little bit about Ma'ili'ili? We're going to go to a short break pretty soon, so if you could just give us a quick overview that we can just bring on back during our next segment.
Definitely. So Ma'ili'ili is a small watershed area within Waianae down on the west coast. And this project is really similar to what Miranda is doing over in Kaalaea and Waiahole. And I'm lucky enough to stand on the shoulders of giants and learn from those before me who've done grant projects like Kaalaea and Waiahole and bring that to Ma'ili'ili.
Fantastic. So I think it's wonderful hearing about how you've taken not only your passions for environmental stewardship, but your skills in community building and outreach and agricultural technical assistance, and really bringing that to the table and strengthening our local agricultural sector. So we'll be right back with another segment, and we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about these two projects and how farmers and landowners can seek potential funding for BMP practices. Welcome back. We're here today in the ThinkTech Hawaii studio with Miranda Foley of Ecologic Consulting and Frankie Koethe of Oahu Resource Conservation and Development Council. Today we're talking a little bit about funding opportunities for farmers and landowners in the Kaalaea, Waiahole and Ma'ili'ili watersheds. So we spent the first half of our show just talking a little bit how these movers and shakers in local agriculture got involved in agriculture in the first place. We heard that they had skills in technical outreach, community building, planning, and natural resource stewardship, and they kind of brought all these passions and skills to help fund practices and create opportunities for achievements here on the ground in Oahu, specifically in the Kaalaea, Waiahole, and Ma'ili'ili watershed. So when we last left off, we had heard a brief overview of Frankie's project coordination in the Ma'ili'ili watershed. So we're going to speak to her now and just find out, what is this project, where is it going, and how can you help support this project and create real change on the ground in these watersheds to not only protect our natural resources, but to protect our communities as well. So welcome back, guys. Thanks again for joining us in ThinkTech Hawaii studio today. So Frankie, where we left off, you just gave us a brief overview. You gave us like basically the 10-second spiel of Ma'ili'ili. So let's delve a little bit deeper into it and kind of, let us know where's the watershed, and what's the overall goal, and how you're going to fulfill this goal through the project timeline.
Definitely, yeah. So Ma'ili'ili, again, is a small watershed area within Waianae, down on the west coast. And Ma'ili'ili is really special because it's really rich with farmers. There are farmers all within that area, and they need support. They do need support to be able to farm sustainably, and sometimes resources aren't always available to them. And Ma'ili'ili, like Waiahole and Kaalaea, are on that list of watersheds by Hawaii Department of Health that are targeted for watershed restoration and for helping the lands and improving them. And that there are stewards in the land that are promising for doing that kind of work. Mm-hmm. And so as the project coordinator, it's my opportunity and my ability to help some of these farmers apply for grant funding. And so this grant funding that comes from EPA and trickled into Hawaii Department of Health and then trickled into Oahu RC&D and then into my hands. Oh, so powerful.
So powerful.
Into my hands to help these farmers and spread the wealth. And what's going on is that it's a cost share opportunity. So these farmers want to do best management practices, which include different kind of vegetation to protect their properties from soil rushing off into the watershed. Because within this watershed of Ma'ili'ili is two large rivers. Rivers are streams. I'd call them rivers because they're always running and they're very large. And these soils can dump into them. And if we don't keep those soils on the land, then it'll go into those reefs and into the waterways. And being able to use cost share, we can help these farmers fund practices that they want to do but aren't able to on their own because of the cost expenses. So Oahu RC&D has the ability to give them 67% of the cost, or to match them in the cost.
Wow.
And then the farmers pay up the 33%, and so it's a very discounted rate to be able to help their properties and do stewardship on their lands that they wouldn't be able to before.
So that cost share program allows that, basically that discounted rate, but it allows that opportunity to actually install these practices that we've been talking about in the watershed management plans and also these grants we've been talking about. So you mentioned a little bit about financial resources, but I was hoping you could talk a little bit about either community outreach or other types of resources that Oahu RC&D lends to these kinds of communities, specifically farmers and landowners in these watersheds that we've been mentioning.
Definitely. So part of this project and being within Ma'ili'ili is that we do workshops for the farmers and give them resources that they can utilize on either a day-to-day basis or within their farming plans. So we actually held our first workshop in Ma'ili'ili down at Kahumana Farms. It was a great group of people. We had over 30 people attend.
Fantastic.
And we talked to them about using conservation planning as a tool and talking about this grant opportunity and being able to work through the application and how to apply and do I fit in this project and it was just a great opportunity to go and speak to the people on the ground and meet the community and really get to tie those relationships in.
And it seems like you're on the ground now.
Yeah. So it's great. It's wonderful, yeah, to be able to work with that community.
Oh, fantastic. So say someone in the audience is listening, what can they do to support not only your project, your organization, but also our local farmers in these watersheds? What's something that the audience can take away and say, oh, that is one small commitment or action I can do to help Frankie or help Miranda, or basically just help local agriculture in general?
I would say just talking about it, just getting the word out and communicating with each other, talking about agriculture and understanding that it's not just a farm, it's the people in the farm that have to do all of this work, and really just talking about what it takes to be a farmer and looking for those resources and just Googling agriculture in Hawaii, find your resources and talk about it. I think that would be the main takeaway, definitely.
And definitely talking about it on ThinkTech Hawaii,
Oh, yes.
Hawaii Food and Farmer
Yes,
Series, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, continue viewing our show and just continue that conversation about agriculture and getting to know your local farmer.
Yeah.
So we know how we can support the Ma'ili'ili project, but I'd like to kind of transition back to Waiahole and Kaalaea, back to the windward side. I was hoping if you could give a quick timeline of your project and any accomplishments that have happened, during the project timeline, and perhaps we could see some photos as we're talking about all the different BMPs that have been implemented by these farmers and landowners to help with soil erosion, soil health, those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And two things just to take a step back. When we talk about the timeline, this does predate the Ma'ili'ili project, and so it's the same method,
Yes.
just a different timeline. So everything that Frankie just said about best management practices or BMPs and helping farmers with the cost share, exactly the same, different footprint.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that in a year from now, Frankie will be showing some of her before and after pictures.
She better.
I'll be back.
So to consider this a prequel.
Okay.
So timeline-wise, we initiated our first cost share grant with a farmer in October of 2015. And we had a series of workshops since then, the first one being similar to what Frankie just described, saying, hey, we have resources, we have money, come and check us out.
Take it.
And we had already done a similar project in Waimanalo. So we had a knowledge sharing, farmer to farmer conversation between folks in Waimanalo who had done this project and farmers in Waiahole or Kaalaea who might be interested. So I do have some pictures for you today to talk to you and to show you why we went there. We went into an area that's suffering from erosion, not necessarily from farming, but just from natural erosion, background erosion, landscape. And so these areas were severely eroded. What happens when rain hits these eroded areas? It grabs some soil and walks right on down to the corals. So we looked at these areas, and then with these best management practices, with these cost shares, we worked with farmers to make it green. And not just green, ag green, native plants, food crops, ground cover. Yeah, it's watershed health. And so ideally, yes, you can eat it, but it's hard to farm on 45-degree slopes.
Yes.
So we help them make it green. We help them use it. We help them also improve their use of the land. And so with these best management practices, we helped control erosion. We changed landscapes. We took landscapes that were eroded or they had unstable stream banks or unstable hillsides, and we helped them stabilize them. We planted hundreds, I think almost maybe even 1,000, no, I'm going to go with hundreds, of koa trees.
Conservative estimate.
Yeah, conservative. Koa trees down through the canopy, lo'ulu palms, shrubs, and then all the way down to ground cover, perennial peanut, as well as other food crops, tapioca, and ornamentals like tea leaf. But we helped them change these landscapes so that they could better capture rainwater and reduce the amount of soil that rain took with it as it ran off the land. So we took brown, made it green. We took unstable hillsides and we helped stabilize them. We took areas that were predominantly invasive, dominated by invasive species, so one single species, and we helped recognize that diversity not only improves ag success, but it also improves watershed health. So every best management practice that we installed, and we did this over from October 2015 right up until April 2017, so over the last year and change, every best management practice that we installed helped improve ag and helped improve watershed health. It was a twofer.
It's a great word,
Yeah.
twofer. So could you talk a little bit about how you found these farmers? Did you go on a ThinkTech Hawaii show and they came running, or how did you reach out to the community and find these people in the Waiahole Valley?
Just imagine me on the back of a horse with like a lasso.
Oh yeah, again, another on-the-ground counterpart. Yeah.
It was completely word of mouth. We started with one willing farmer. And it's actually,
Just takes one.
it's a hard sell to do a cost share and give away money, essentially.
You wouldn't think it would be to give away money, but
Well,
it really is.
I think we're just used to being skeptical, and I think it's understandable. I think that naturally people are like, why are you helping me? But Oahu
What do you
RC&D, yeah, Oahu RC&D is set up to help farmers farm. That's the mission. And so this mission is executed in this case by bringing them these resources, 67%, and asking for another 33% in the form of cash or match, which could be labor. And so it's hard for farmers to get the simplicity of that because they're used to applying for maybe more paper-heavy grants or having to jump through hoops to do ag. And so when I think about what we could do to help these farmers, like Frankie said, have those conversations, understand the importance of ag, always ask yourself, is this going to make it easier to farm? And so when you go up to a farmer and you say, I really want to help you, they're kind of like, why?
Like,
Nobody
okay.
else is.
Good luck.
I've had farmers come up to me and say, no one in the last 20 years in the farming has tried to help me farm.
Oh my goodness.
And we help them by helping them with a conservation plan to map out how they can help the soil and water. We provide funding to implement their conservation plan. And we're providing, as Frankie said, workshops to connect them with more resources because it's not going to just be one person that's going to come in and help farming in Hawaii. So these workshops help connect them with other agencies and other grant funds to help them farm.
And I think speaking with both of you today, we've really spoke about the benefit of community rallying behind not only our local agriculture, but just our natural resource stewardship in general. You guys are talking about financial resources and technical assistance resources, but I don't think you identified yourselves as resources for these farmers. You guys are so modest, but I'll go ahead and say it for you. I think you have been great resources for these farmers. Not only, even if you don't have the info, you help them find that info so they can continue farming, strengthening our local agricultural sector, overall keeping our Hawaii's natural resources pristine for generations to come. And so farming can happen for generations to come too. So I appreciate both of you taking the time to come talk to us about all this project coordination you're doing on the ground. You know, you're on the horseback with the lasso, so so I think it's really great that not only are we working on Oahu, but hopefully that this is a project that can be extended throughout all of Hawaii, because these are issues not just found on Oahu. Farming's on all the islands, and we need to continue it and always support it and talk about it so we can keep that conversation going. So.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to thank you all today for joining us on ThinkTech Hawaii, Hawaii Food and Farmers Series. Our show today was featuring funding opportunities for farmers and landowners in the Waiahole, Kaalaea, and Ma'ili'ili watersheds, featuring Miranda Foley of Ecologic Consulting and Frankie Koethe of Oahu Resource Conservation and Development Council. So if we wanted to find out more information about these organizations, Miranda, could you say your website really quickly for our audience?
My website is ecologichawaii.com, Hawaii spelled out, but more information about the Waiahole Kaalaea project can be found at Oahu RC&D. I think it's /resources, but that's a good place to start, oahurcd.org.
And I think that goes for Frankie, too.
It sure does, yes. oahurcnd.org, and more about my project, oahurcnd.org/Ma'ili'ili.
Fantastic. So I'd like to thank our guests again for coming on for ThinkTech Hawaii show featuring food and farms. And I hope that everyone was able to not only support you by listening today, but provide some support in the future. So like they said, word of mouth is important. If you know farmers and landowners who would be interested in this cost-sharing program, please email admin@oahurcd.org, or like they mentioned, go to oahurcd.org just for more general information on agriculture and specifically these watershed projects. Mahalo, aloha.